A lot of people coming in. We're going to have a good party today.
I hope so. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ladam Discapier DC's Holiday Tips and Tricks Zoom. We're so glad you could join us this afternoon. I'm Avery Mitri, co-second VP of Education and Community Outreach. For anyone new to Ladam, we're a professional organization of women leaders in food, beverage, and hospitality dedicated to supporting one another and giving back through mentorships, scholarships, and community outreach. Today's event is all about sharing inspiration for the season with fun, practical ideas from our DOMs to make your holidays a little more delicious, creative, and stress-free. Before we get started, a quick reminder to please switch to speaker view if you haven't already, so you can see each presenter clearly as they share their tips. And we'll start with a few short presentation from our panel, followed by time for your questions and a little discussion at the end. So please make sure to continue to drop any questions in the chat box, which we will review after everyone's done. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-VP, Kristen Schott, who will introduce our wonderful panelists.
Hi, everyone. As Avery said, I'm Kristen Schott. I am the co-second VP with Avery, and we're so excited to have you here. Let's get started. We're going to start with Bonnie Everly.
Hey everybody, so excited to talk to you today. It is, as they say, the most wonderful time of year. It is also the most stressful time of year. So the goal here is to try to give you a few pointers here and there that might make your life a little bit easy. And for me today, I'm going to specifically be talking about the beverage world. I work for the Wine and Spirit Education Trust, also known as the WSET, right there in line with some of our other educational institutions like the Court of Master Som, Master of Wine. Before that, I was in distribution, so I was spending a lot of time back then talking about exactly this. And one of the things that we like to do is try to organize our thoughts when we're pulling together a party and how we can make sure that our guests are as happy as possible without giving them sort of a decision fatigue, as it were. Typically, when we have smaller parties, it's easier to know our guest because it is more intimate. When we have some of these larger parties, it's a lot more difficult. So we need to be making these decisions that, help us not lose our minds with having to do too much and also help our guests choose the best thing as easily as possible. So coming at that from a beverage point of view, one of the things that I always like to set out in an ice bucket, and you can get as creative with that as you want to, is bubbles to start. And I say bubbles not just because I love them, but I use that term because bubbles are a comprehensive term for any sparkling wine. You could also call it sparkling wine. One of the things that we want to be mindful of, though, is that champagne specifically actually only comes from a very specific region in Champagne, France. So if you are offering your guests champagne, please call me. I would like to be there as well so that I can enjoy with you. But otherwise, there are lots of options that you can choose from. Each country has their own focus. Italy has Prosecco, Spain has Cava, the United States here has various different styles of American sparkling wine. And in fact, that reminds me of one that I like to use that is out there on the market. So if you happen to see it, feel free to grab it. It's called Gruet. It comes from New Mexico, believe it or not. And they have various different styles, but it runs around 17 or so dollars. So it's a great choice if you're going to be having a lot of people over. And they have Rosé, Blanc de Blanc, Brut. I always love putting a few bottles out so that people can just help themselves. It's an easy choice when guests first get there and they're a little bit hesitant. It allows them to just kind of get the party started on their own. You don't have to run around filling glasses if you don't want to. Likewise, when I'm thinking about my white still wines that I want to choose, one of the things that we are trying to be mindful of is that we don't want to pick anything that's too polarizing. And in a way, you're probably thinking to yourself, how could you choose a polarizing wine? Well, it's possible. People seem to have very strong feelings about things like New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. Beautiful wines are made there, absolutely fantastic flavor profiles, but for some people, it's really aggressive. So I would say shy away from that choice. But that does not mean that you can't have a lovely Sauvignon Blanc. They make great wines in the Loire Valley that are Sauvignon Blanc, slightly more subdued. Also, don't forget our friends in Chile. Absolutely fantastic, affordably placed Sauvignon Blancs that are a great party wine. Likewise, another really polarizing option is the California Chardonnay. And for you Chardonnay lovers, I am sorry. Nothing against you. Some people out there in the world believe that that oaky buttery style is not for them, and that's okay. So if you're looking for something that is a little bit heavier and a little bit fuller bodied, but not all the way over to that super popcorny style, just grab an unoaked Chardonnay. Very easy fix. Also, if you're looking for something that's not as well known, you can grab an Albarino from Spain. This is going to be a wine that's still got that freshness. It has a little bit more body. And it's actually a nice little educational tool for anybody out there that's interested in trying something different. So those are some options when you're deciding your white wine choice. Same goes for reds. Don't go for the most tannic, heaviest Cabernet that you've ever seen in your life. Try to grab something a little bit more middle of the road. People are going to be walking around, they're going to be chatting, they're going to be talking. They're not sitting down necessarily to a formal dinner party, but that might be part of your plan. So if you're having a party where people are kind of chatting and having snacks, grab something that's a little bit softer. Believe it or not, Merlots, I know they get a bad name, are actually delicious. I also personally really like to choose a nice Côte de Rhône, which is a specific region in France. It's a blend, typically Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre. And it's got enough fruit to it where it's very pleasant. It can have enough structure to it where it's really interesting for some of those more heavy red wine drinkers. So that definitely kind of crosses the band and makes the team happy, as it were. Um, so those are a few ideas when it comes to what you're going to be putting out there for people to choose. Another thing that I also like to mention when we're talking about parties, you're going to have those cocktail people out there, and that is fantastic. I always like to start with a cocktail myself. But if you have people in the corner trying to make tons of different styles of fancy cocktails, like that's going to get a little messy. So one of the things that I always like to recommend is that people choose to batch a cocktail. So if you pre-batch a cocktail, you can get it in a really lovely drink dispenser. Again, you can be as creative as you want. And I think some of that creativity Keisha's going to talk about next. Whereas I am actually not that creative, but nonetheless. You can put something in there that's easy for people to grab a cup or a glass, a little bit of ice, pour it out of the drink dispenser, and it, again, that frees up a little bit more of your time. You could do something like a ginger cranberry whiskey sour, have some dried fruit next to it. They can kind of help themselves. Again, this is making your guests happy, also making yourself happy so that you don't have to chase them around all the time. So those are a few things that I always recommend when we're talking about putting together beverages. I've put together a bit of a checklist for everyone, so that will get sent around at the end. And the one final thing that I do always like to mention is don't forget to put out some kind of hydration station. We all have a crazy Uncle Larry out there. And crazy Uncle Larry, he dips in a little bit too much every once in a while. So if he is readily available to a glass of water or a mocktail or something that you can quietly hand him while he's standing in the corner talking to someone, that's always a good thing to do, whether it's small bottles of water throughout the whole place, or if it's another drink dispenser full of water and ice. It's always a good idea because it ensures, again, happiness for your guests and happiness for yourself. So I hope that those are some tips that are really going to help everybody. That was a bit short. I think I'm talking a little bit fast, but that's okay. I think there were a few questions in the chat, but we'll address those at the end. And with that, I will turn it back over to Kristen.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. I want to come to every party you're throwing now with all your bubbles. Next we have Keisha Washington.
Hi, everyone. I hope everybody is doing all right. So I'm going to talk about tablescapes. And it's funny because this is probably like a little favorite thing of mine, I guess, when I do with my clients. So for those that don't know, I have a private personal chef business called The Key Ingredient. I've had the business for over 10 years and I do private upscale experiences. I call them experiences because I do the dinner, I do the shopping, the service, all of it, your tablescape, all of it. And so one thing that I really love to do is bring some of my favorite things to the tablescape And then I also like to get the client's idea of what their vibe is, what they're kind of going for the holidays. So one thing that I definitely kind of came up with, that I kind of thought about when I'm doing my tablescapes or doing someone else's at their home, is basically the tablescape should tell a story. And I love that because what kind of story are you trying to tell for the holidays? Do you want it warm? Do you want it cozy? Do you want it romantic? Do you want it fun? So your tablescape should definitely tell a story. And it should feel like your menu taste, which I really love. So kind of thinking about what you're serving for the menu. So for example, Thanksgiving, we already know we love the turkey, we love the mac and cheese, we love the sweet potatoes and all of that. You want some sweet in there, you want some savory in there. So adding little touches to your tablescape makes it that much better. So, and I kind of thought about it a little bit, the heart of a beautiful tablescape. So I kind of wrote something that reminded me of that. So I'm going to share it. A beautiful tablescape tells a story. It should feel like the menu taste, rich, layered, and inviting. Every table has its own mood. And when it's done right, it pulls your guests into a place where they want to sit down, connect, and communicate with each other. The key word I always come back to is intention, and each element should serve a purpose at the table. So maybe something brings a spark of communication, a spark of conversation, and simple touches definitely are beautiful for people to smile about at the table. So I got together kind of like my 6 tips, I think, that really kind of help bring the table together. And then once I kind of give you the tips, I'm going to actually give you a little presentation that I put together of some of the tablescapes that I've done for my guests, and done for clients that I have, for their tablescape. So first tip that I have is layer like a chef. Think of your table like a plate. Start with your base, a runner, some greenery, something simple as linen. Then add your centerpiece as your main element. And then finish with accents, herbs, citrus slices, candles. You want to build layer and textures, and color. So the same way you would put together a plate, for Thanksgiving or for Christmas brunch or just for Christmas dinner, that's the way you kind of want to think of your table. Second tip that I have is add edible touches. This is actually really nice when it comes to decor for your table. It should be beautiful and functional. Rosemary tucked into the napkins, sugared cranberries scattered for the centerpiece, dried citrus fruit for different pops of color, and then a sensory design, something that smells good, that looks good, and it ties back to your menu. So I always think that that's really cool is when you can add certain touches from your menu to the table. Third tip I have is mix your textures and heights. So every table needs a little movement. So mix tall candles with low florals, combine rustic wood chargers, sleek glasses, and then of course, just like salt balances sweetness, contrast balances your table as well. Tip 4 I have is include a signature touch. So something that says something about you, whether it's a mini cocktail, like Bonnie was mentioning earlier, or a glass of wine, an amuse bouche, some small handwritten cards. I love that. I think that's always a really nice, cute personal touch. And then it sets up the mood for the dinner, I think. Fifth tip I have is keep it personal. People remember the details and when it feels personal. So handwritten notes, like I said, gratitude notes, a take-home favor is always nice. I do that a lot when it comes to clients that like a little mini dessert. I'll put a little mini dessert together for them to take home. But it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to break the bank for that. Just something that's heartfelt and from the heart. And then last tip that I have, style with intention. Your table doesn't have to be perfect. It should be comfortable, designed by you. That's something that you love. Make the space inviting, serving dishes, and make sure that it's cozy enough to start conversation. Um, and it shouldn't feel staged. It should feel lively at the table. So let me kind of share my screen, if I can, a little bit, and kind of give you an idea of some tables that I've done, and then as well as a few dishes that I also like to put together as well. So this was a brunch event and some dishes that I've done. Christmas. This is at a client's home. Also a Christmas dinner as well. Some beautiful little desserts. This is a brunch event. Simple wine tasting dinner. And then pops of color and stuff like that. This is kind of like a more classic dinner there. I love pops of color and flowers, as you can see.
Mm.
There's just a few more tables. All right.
Nice.
All right. So we kind of go back here. I can get back to my screen. Okay, so hopefully, hopefully you kind of get the gist and the idea of just some fun colors, some fun tablescapes, some fun dishes that you could do. That's one thing that I really love during the holidays is getting a chance to play with some different textures, different types of dishes, things to put on the table, just to kind of make it your own. So I will have kind of like the 6 tips that I went over in a little printout that you'll get later on. And I'm gonna turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Keisha. I loved what you had to say about each tablescape having its own mood. I'm going to channel that when I put together my Thanksgiving table this year. Next, we have Carrie Kelly.
Thanks, everybody. I cannot believe I'm actually saying happy holidays. It always seems to come up so fast, but how fun to plan for entertaining our family and friends during the holidays. I have a really fun assignment to talk to you about today, and that is bread. Despite the old adage, I actually could live by bread alone. I suppose I might want to have a little olive oil, perhaps a glass of wine, a little piece of cheese, but you get my point. I love bread. I bake bread every week for my home and friends. And so I was pretty thrilled when Kristen Avery asked me to talk about doing something festive for the holidays with bread. And I have something for you that I think Keisha will approve of because it's a recipe that is delicious and it doubles as a festive holiday presentation for the table. And that is pull apart bread. So pull apart bread, as you all know, is usually bread in a ring. Sometimes it's in a bundt pan. It could be made in different vessels, but basically it's round bread and it's scored, and you pull out your hunk and you dig into it. And so I thought that this was a perfect way to bring bread to a festive holiday table and or Wonderful for small gatherings, family, and I was thinking particularly of Christmas morning, because my mother used to always have something warm and comforting and wonderful for Christmas morning. So it took me back there. So here's this is a very simple recipe. So you don't have to be a practiced bread maker to make this, and you will be getting the recipe with some a couple of flavor variations that will go out after this is over. It's a very simple bread recipe. It uses all-purpose flour, active instant yeast, and so it could not be easier. I made 2 rings of pull-apart bread, I think probably in an hour and a half, start to finish. The bread is soft and chewy, so it can be served room temperature. This is not something that you have to pull right out of the oven to put on your table, especially for a festive cocktail party environment. So I'm going to walk through some of the basic steps of making this pull-apart bread, just so you can begin to envision it when you read the recipe later. It can easily be made in a stand mixer. Your very basic bread ingredients of yeast, which has been foamed up a bit in some warm water. Run it through until your bread is nice and smooth and elastic. You pull it out, you divide it in two, and then you roll it out. There's some resting periods in here that you'll see in the recipe, but this is such an easy dough to handle. There's no reason to be intimidated by it if you are not a regular bread maker. Just follow the instructions in the recipe and you'll be fine. You roll out this beautiful, smooth, elastic dough into a rectangle. Now the fun part comes is you spread a filling into it. And I'm going to go over some great ideas for fillings. I had so much fun testing these recipes because, of course, on your behalf, I had to make a number of them and we had to eat them to see if they were worthy of sharing with you. So thank you. You spread your filling and then you roll up the dough. It rolls very easily. It's not a sticky dough. And then what you do is just score it so you don't go all the way down. You score it at about 1-inch intervals. You put it into a cake pan, bring your 2 edges together, pinch it, let it have a little nap, and then it goes in the oven for 20 to 25 minutes and you're ready to go. Now, I'm going to put up a picture of a couple of them that I did, and I'm going to talk to you about some filling ideas. And also some, you might call them decorating ideas to make these worthy of one of Keisha's tables. I hope she can tell me that. All right, let me put this photograph up. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, one of the ideas for a holiday combination is I made the one on the left by spreading, once the dough is rolled out into a rectangle, I spread some softened goat cheese. And on top of that, I put some cranberry sauce. You can make the cranberry sauce yourself, which I did, or you can buy store-bought cranberry sauce. So, make it easy for yourself. And I added minced rosemary, quite a bit of a couple of tablespoons of minced rosemary that I sprinkled on top of that. I rolled that up, and you can see in the photograph how you score it. That does a couple of things. It keeps the bread from bursting when you turn it around into a circle to bake it, but it also tells your guest where to sort of grab and pull a piece off, and it will come apart easily, as you know from trying other pull-apart breads, I'm sure. That particular recipe has such quintessential holiday flavors in it. They're warm and they're wintry. One of the fun things about having this shape in a ring is to take a ramekin. I couldn't find any holly yet, but that would have been my choice. A little ramekin and fill it with sprigs of holly that has beautiful ripe red berries on it. And you've got both something edible and something that decorates your table and looks like the holidays. The one on the right is actually chocolate and cream cheese. So, fine for a holiday table. This is also one I think would be delicious for breakfast. And this has cream cheese spread on it, a ganache, a very simple ganache, and there's a recipe for the ganache as well. And then I sprinkled cinnamon on that. And in the middle is a ramekin that has a little bit of sweetened cream cheese, just in case there wasn't enough inside the bread. So these are a couple of ideas, and I love something like this that you can put on the table that is easy to eat for the guests. I think when you, especially if you're doing a reception type um, party, you don't want guests to try to juggle glasses and plates. So this is a very simple pull apart, have a little napkin, eat it, and move on to the next food item. So I think it works beautifully for a reception type cocktail, again, as well as the family gathering around. Some of the fun flavor combinations that you could try if you've got kids, and kids would love, this is an easy one for children to participate in to make. Peanut butter and jelly would be delicious and rolled up with bread, and kids would love it. Or the kid in me would love chocolate and peanut butter. And again, you could add cinnamon or nuts. Sausage and cheese for a breakfast pull-apart bread, or something like Parmesan, grated Parmesan and sun-dried tomatoes. Another favorite of mine is caramelized onions with some pecorino cheese and just a little bit of chopped up bacon put into it. So as you can see, you can decorate it any number of ways. The decoration in the middle can be edible, or it can be, as Keisha pointed out, I love sprigs of things that are food themselves, sprigs of parsley and rosemary to decorate the center of the bread. So you could choose to go either direction with that. So I hope you all will have a chance to try this for the holidays and come up with your own flavor combination, and bring your kids, grandkids, nieces, and nephews in to help you make it, because they will love it. So that is festive bread for the holidays. So I wish you all a very happy holiday. And Kristen, the mic goes back to you.
Thank you so much. I think we have a list of people who are ready for testing and tasting your bread. So next we have Susan Barokas.
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. Really happy to participate in this. You know, anticipation is so much of what we get out of events and holidays, and the preparations that we go through really add a lot for each of us. And so I'm a chef, food writer, cooking instructor, and I'm also addicted to home entertaining, to be honest. You know, so I'm always looking for ideas, and I love what has happened so far. So I'm the one talking not about Christmas, but about Hanukkah. And, you know, Hanukkah happens usually at the same time of year, but it's based on, it's a little confusing because the date always changes. It's based on the lunar Jewish calendar. And so whenever it starts, it's celebrated for 8 days and 8 nights. And each night we light a menorah or a Hanukkah, and we have 9 candles because you use the middle one to light the others. And one of the things that I really, really love about Hanukkah is well, a couple things. It is really about oil, light, and miracles. And those are like some beautiful things to celebrate. Just for people who don't know any history about this, real quick, it commemorates in 168 BCE when the Greek Empire was ruling in Jerusalem. They conquered Jerusalem and went into the great Second Temple, and the king built an altar to Zeus and started sacrificing pigs. And so once the Jews were able to reconquer and get the temple back, it was unusable. They had to purify it. And one of the things also is there's always an eternal light burning, even today in synagogues, above the ark. Always. It can be electric, whatever. In the past, obviously, in the ancient time, it was oil. And when they got back to the temple, they found that all of the pure oil to use in that very special eternal flame, there was enough for one day. So, of course, the miracle is it took 8 days to prepare new oil. That one vial lasted for the 8 days. And hence, this is the holiday. And to me, the second point about light and miracles, we're adding light every night, a little bit more light to the world. And thirdly, we get to celebrate by eating things in oil, which is a great excuse for fried food. A lot of people are familiar with potato latkes. They come from the Eastern European tradition. It's called Ashkenazic. My heritage is from the Sephardic tradition, which is my ancestors were in Spain and got kicked out in the Inquisition, went to the Ottoman Empire before coming to the US. And so our food is very different. So I'm going to do two things. One is you're getting 4 recipes from me. The first one is buñuelos de calabaza. Calabaza, and there's a picture. These are fried fritters. This one in particular is pumpkin. It would be great at your Thanksgiving also, or that whole weekend, or any time right now during this time of year. These are no yeast. They're simple. You'll see on the recipe, they really use just some baking powder to rise, and they're drizzled in honey. And some people, many people actually, historians, think that these buñuelos, the fried fritter in whatever form, were taken by Jews who had converted or were living secretly as Jews and escaped to the New World to Mexico. And they turned into sopapillas, which are almost identical to these, also drizzled with honey, which is very interesting. But every culture has its fried food, and it's delicious. In Israel and in the US a lot now, we eat jelly donuts. Yeah, it's a great, I know people who don't eat donuts ever except at Hanukkah. Now, there's also, instead of potato pancakes, you can make your patties or pancakes out of almost anything you want. These are called, in Ladino, the language of Sephardic Jews, keftes de calabaza, pumpkin patties. Another great idea for Thanksgiving brunch or at dinner. They really are delicious. I love sprinkling them with nuts and then pouring maple syrup or honey a little bit. These are a really nice kind of coriander, allspice, cinnamon. So they have a lot of flavor. And pumpkin is very, very important to the Jewish community, the Sephardic Jewish community. It was one of our ingredients that we used extensively, squash, pumpkin. They're all called calabaza in Ladino. So the one thing I have a tip, because a lot of people, we measure, a quarter cup of honey or a teaspoon of honey or some other sticky, maple syrup. So if you oil very lightly the spoon, the measuring cup, or measure the oil first and then measure the sticky ingredient, the ingredient will release much easier. If you're not using oil in any other way, you can just use a very light spray from one of the spray oils. And also adding pumpkin to any recipe increases the nutrient value quite a bit. So, and then the third recipe actually is one that is representative of, it doesn't have to really be fried food. You can use oil in a number of ways. You can roast vegetables, or here, this is a really wonderful seasonal salad of fennel leeks, which are raw, but they're in lemon, and so that starts to take the edge off. And chickpeas. Sometimes I add apples, sometimes I add feta. You know, one of the important things is to make each recipe your own. That's always what we want to do. And I know many of the people on this call already do that. So this is a really simple, lovely lemon and olive oil dressing that is pretty easy to make. The whole salad, it's a lot of slicing and that's it. And then this also, the other thing about this salad that's really lovely is it'll last for a week in the refrigerator because of the ingredients. I like eating it within like 3 days or so, but it will last. And so it's really nice. I always advise putting the nuts on after, like right before you're going to serve, because the nuts will get a bit soggy in the refrigerator. So if you are going to do something with the nuts, either you're going to have them be a bit soggy, or you'll just, if you have a ring, take them off, separate them, add them back the next time you serve it. So now I just want to demonstrate a very easy recipe that I love. This is for roasted olives, okay? I happen to use Kalamata as the black and just a can of green olives from Whole Foods, you know. But at the end, you have lemon slices roasted in there, rosemary, garlic, fennel seeds, and cumin seeds. And this just has great flavor. And, you know, these are pantry items. So if you have unexpected guests coming, you could do this in a half hour and be able to serve them. So I'm just going to throw one back together. You'll see how incredibly easy it is. Also, these make a great gift. If you want your guests to have a take-home, pack them in a jar with a pretty ribbon, let them take them home. Just mark the date they expire, which is 2 weeks from when they were made, because it's cooked and kept in oil. I wanted to show in the recipe, it has specific instructions for cutting your lemon. So after you wash it, and this is an organic lemon, well washed, you just cut it in half the long way. And you're going to go ahead and take 1/2 and slice it very thin. And these are the slices that will get roasted. Okay, I thought I had a very sharp knife. Obviously not. Okay. And then you take and you cut the remaining half in half. And you set aside for that squeeze after. And you do the rest. You cut the rest. Ugh, this is embarrassing to have such a dull knife. I just grabbed it and hadn't checked it. Okay. So now comes the really easy part of combining everything in a bowl. So I have fennel seeds, a teaspoon of cumin seeds. It says 2 to 3 garlic cloves, about 2 teaspoons. This is 3 teaspoons because I'm a garlic addict. And so I just love it. And it gets roasted so beautifully. I don't know if you can see it on the top here are all these little bits of garlic that are roasted. You scrape them out of the pan at the end and try not to eat them all. And try to get some of them actually onto what you're serving. And then this is 3 tablespoons of oil. Olive oil is, or I like olive oil. Obviously, it's a dish of olives. Stir this up. You don't need salt and pepper. You can add it if you want. And sometimes, I think I'll do it today, Aleppo pepper. So I don't know how many of you use Aleppo pepper, but instead of cayenne, I use Aleppo because while it brings a little heat, it brings a lot of flavor. So I just sprinkle some in. Depends on how much, not nearly as hot as cayenne. So it's one of my favorite ingredients. Okay, we've done that. Now, all we have to do is throw in the rosemary, throw in the lemon slices, get everything bathed in the oil. I'm going to break this one in half. These are from my garden. My rosemary did so well this summer for a change. All right. And now we add the olives. Okay. And we stir it all up, thinking, of course, as we're doing it, that you can already smell garlic and rosemary. So delicious. You want everything coated in the oil, and then you're going to pop it into a pan. This is actually a little small for this amount. It's nice if it spreads out in one layer. So I will probably change this to a different pan to bake it. But in the meantime, you can see you could do it like this and stir it around a few times as it's cooking, or you could get a bigger pan. But as the rosemary, and I like to tuck it in so it really gives flavor, you stand up some of the lemon pieces and you unbury them so that they really roast nicely. And at the end, when you take it out of the oven and the rosemary cools, you can see some pieces here. It comes off the stem really easily. Take it off, throw it on into the mixture also. That's roasted olives. So easy. All these pantry ingredients that you probably already have, so you can throw it together at a moment's notice. Your olives, you can use any kind of olives you want. I tend to use, just like I said, the green canned, although I've used others. You don't have to spend a lot of money on the olives because you're dressing them up with all of this seasoning and the roasting. I did use calamatas in this one, and you can see the difference. I just have the plain canned black olives in this one. No one's going to care because it tastes great. So if you keep your pantry stock, which I'm suspecting most of you do, this is really easy. And I hope that everyone's holiday season is filled with light and meaning and deliciousness, of course, always. And thank you all so much. And if you have any questions, drop them in the chat and we'll take care of it all afterwards.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was wonderful. I thought it was also delicious looking, and your fennel and leek celery salad is so fresh and bright. I want that on my table.
Yeah.
Next, we have Shani Wissanant.
Hello, hello, everybody. First of all, thank you guys for inviting me to participate in this year's event. I've had so much fun and I've actually learned so much from all of the DOMs who have gone before me, so thank you so much. Today, I'm going to talk about dessert because that's kind of what I do. Specifically, my heritage, my baking experience, my mother, my grandmother, and all the women in my family, we have a real affinity for pound cakes, which are a Southern classic, a Southern staple. I'm sure most of you on here have seen a pound cake. Some people call it a bundt cake or two in your lifetimes. And I would be willing to guess that those of you who have seen one and who have tasted one have a favorite flavor that you always default to. So okay. Several years ago, when I started Begin with Butter, which is my baking education platform, I really decided to dive in and do everything I could to make the humble pound cake just the show-stopping success on every table that it graces. Pound cake is so dear to me largely because my mother made them all of the time. She was famous for her lemon pound cake. And growing up, there would always be like a kerfuffle every time she brought one into a place. It always brought these massive smiles to people's faces. And I remember those pound cakes just being placed lovingly onto those tables. And my mother just being so happy to be able to provide those kinds of smiles to people. My mother was also a woman of elegance, of great grace, and she was actually a very beautiful woman. And so as I was going down my pound cake road of my own, I wanted to marry those two things to pay homage to my mother. But I knew that in order to make pound cakes, to give them their moment, as it were, that I would have to accomplish 3 different things, in addition to making sure that it tasted great, or that they taste great, because that's always, always, always job number 1. But the three things that I needed to do in order to marry my love of the taste of pound cakes with an absolutely beautiful experience was to make sure that my pound cake had very deep caramelization, deep color, because a blonde pound cake just doesn't hit my palate the same way. It doesn't hit my eyes. It has to have a beautiful, deep caramelization. Pound cakes come from these elaborate pans. And so my pound cakes always have to have like the best, most crisp design from my pans. And finally, I had to have a glaze that grabbed the pound cake and didn't run down the sides like it was trying to run away from the pound cake. So my tips for caramelization. So those are kind of the three things that I wanted to talk about. My tips for caramelization: a pound cake, friends, traditionally has a lot of sugar, and that sugar does most of the heavy lifting on the caramelization front. What I find universally when people, go to my site or email me and say, my pound cake didn't caramelize, I don't know why, I just took out a cup of the sugar because I felt like 2.5 cups was too much. The reason why it's not caramelizing, friends, is because it needed that sugar to actually caramelize. Yes, there are other elements that are going to make it caramelize. The baking soda, which I tend to use in most of my pound cakes, does some lifting in that it speeds up that reaction. But the sugar needs to be there in order to get that beautiful, beautiful crust that you are expecting from a really good pound cake. Let's see, baking temperature is key. This lovely oven behind me runs 25 degrees cold. And so when I set it to 325 degrees, which is where it would need to be for a perfect pound cake, it's going to go to a solid 295. It might hit 300 if it's feeling a little jazzy that day. So I just set my oven to 350. The temperature is so important. You want that caramelized crust, and a perfect pound cake has a little bit of a crust on the outside that is just so characteristic of a great pound cake. Some people prep their pans with butter and confectioner sugar. They say that adds some caramelization. I've tried it. I've not necessarily had that same result, but I wanted to share that with you all today just in case you wanted to try it and test it out for yourself. My evidence is anecdotal, and other people have had different experiences with prepping their pans with butter and confectioner sugar, so I wanted to share it with you today. If I'm wanting my cake to be a showstopper, a centerpiece that I add to Keisha's lovely table, or hopefully she would allow it to be on her lovely table, maybe Carrie would allow it to be next to her beautiful pull-apart bread, I have to prep my pan properly. And I have been all around the mulberry bush when it comes to how to prep my pans. My mother, bless her heart, did butter and flour, and she did that meticulously. She taught me how to do that. She never had anything stick. And as I grew into my own, and as I grew into being my own woman, and I grew into that age where, oh my gosh, my mother didn't know everything, I tried cake goop, I tried the aforementioned butter and confectioner sugar, and I also tried baking sprays. And what I found was that my pans developed a film that was very difficult to get off. And so what did I learn? The same thing most of us have learned from our mothers, is that my mother was absolutely right. And so I defaulted back to what I know, which is butter and flour to prep my pans. For chocolate cakes, I use butter and cocoa powder, and the only one I ever have to use a baking spray for is a red velvet cake, because cocoa powder and flour both alter the color of a red velvet pound cake. But I coat that pan with, baking Pam and a prayer, I say all the time. But my favorite way is the way that my mother taught me. Over the summer or earlier this year, one of my community members actually told me, try putting your prepped pan into your freezer while you prep your batter. And friends, when I say that has made my cakes even more stunning and show-stopping, it's given me such better delineation in the design that I'm trying to accomplish with my pound cakes. And I wanted to show you an example, which is why I'm standing here in my kitchen, of a cake that came out of a pan that was prepped with butter and flour, and the pan sat in the oven or sat in the freezer for a couple of hours because I did it before school drop off this morning. But this is what came out. This is what I baked today. So as you can see, this is one of my Nordic ware pans. Nordic ware pans are notorious for sticking because a lot of them have these lovely, strong ridges that batter will get stuck in if you're not very careful, if you don't prep your pan properly. What I have found is that this is the result that I get with butter and flour. So as the mother in Rapunzel sang so nicely to her daughter, mother knew best. Butter and flour was the key component to making sure I got got a beautiful design out of my pound cake or out of my bundt pan. Okay, so the last tip that I wanted to talk to you about was about a glaze recommendation, because you have to understand a pound cake is like a 5-hour start to finish process. And the last thing you want to do at that 5-hour mark, when you are finally ready to glaze your cake, is to pour your glaze on top of your pound cake and have it just run down the sides of your pound cake to the parchment paper underneath and just pool there. So what I try to tell people when they email me and they are desperate for answers is, please don't add too much liquid to your confectioner's sugar. When I start, my measurement for a cup of confectioner's sugar is 120 grams. So for every 120 grams or every cup of confectioner's sugar, I add 1 tablespoon of liquid. For this particular pound cake, which is my sour cream pound cake, you can find it on my site, beginwithbutter.com. This is 2 cups of confectioner's sugar, and I started with 2 tablespoons of milk, whole milk, and then 2 teaspoons of vanilla that I have had steeping since July, which is finally ready and which is amazing. And then a little bit of sea salt, fine sea salt. So what you want to do is just stir each, and before you start adding a lot more liquid, because that's where we all go wrong and make it too thin, before you add any more liquid, you want to stir that confectioner's sugar until you can see that the milk, the liquid, is no longer grabbing any more of that confectioner's sugar. And you'll see that it just starts to kind of glob around. I'm using a whisk. It'll start to glob around the whisk and you won't see any forward progress with respect to your glaze. Once you start adding, I add a half of a teaspoon at a time. And you add that half of a teaspoon and just go back and stir just until you start seeing that the confectioner's sugar is no longer once again being grabbed by that liquid. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where your glaze is the consistency of a thick honey. And when it ribbons, I love this so much. I'm sorry, I love it. I just sit here and watch it. But when it ribbons, right, and it's just a really thick honey, there's a bunch of it stuck in my whisk right now, but it is the consistency of a very, very, very thick room temperature, not a warm honey. But once it gets to that consistency, it's ready to go. If your glaze sits for a while, like mine has been here, don't worry. You probably don't need to add more liquid. Just give it a stir and stir gently because you don't want to create a lot of bubbles in your glaze. But you're going to stir it gently, put it into your glazing cup, which is really just a spouted measuring cup. You're going to bring it over to your cake. And I do 3 passes to start, So I start on the outer rim and I don't pour down the sides. I pour over the top and I let it fall down the sides on its own. This is my son's literal favorite cake. I had to make this when he was gone to school because if he was here when I finished this cake, there would have already been pieces out of it by the time you saw it. But I start from the outside and I do 3 or 4 passes. And as you can see, the glaze just goes down slowly, and that's what we want. A little bit of glaze will drip off of your cake, but it won't be anything substantial. And it's going to be nice and thick for you. And to fill in your gaps, you can either use a spoon, or since I'm doing this on top of my cooling rack, I can just give it a few little taps, and that'll fill in most of the little gaps that I have in my glaze. I just love this cake so much. So once your cake is glazed, you want to let it sit on your cooling rack for maybe 5 to 10 minutes until the glaze really stops. And then at that point, you can carefully move it onto your cake plate, or you can box it up without worrying about a lot of the glaze pooling at the bottom, because you don't want that to happen. Friends, thank you so much for allowing me to participate today. This is something that is so dear to me, and it just meant the world for me to be able to share this with you all. Happy holidays, and I hope you guys have an amazing, amazing time making your own beautiful pound cakes. Thank you.
Thank you. Your joy and excitement over pound cake and glaze is just palpable. I think everyone felt that. And now we have Ali, our last speaker.
So all of that food has made me very hungry, and I know you guys are going to want to capture some of that. So the first thing are some things to consider, which is the angle that you're taking the photo at. The most common one is 90 degrees, and then there's also 45 and 0, and these are basically the 3 that you would use. Then lighting, the shape of dishes next to each other, the spacing between dishes, as well as drinks, silverware, napkins, and hands if you're using them to take any of the photos. So the first one, the flat lay. These are some examples. This is the most common one. This is used for individual items as well as spreads. This is the one that I have where all 3 of these are a spread. You could do this for your holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, anything like that, Hanukkah. And this way you can capture a variety of items in one photo. This is also really good for high plates. So that way you can see the whole item and the plate won't block your food at all. For this, you would consider the size of the plates, the plate shapes, and the spacing. So as you can see here, we don't want the same plates to be right next to each other. We want to have some variety. If you have a long one, then you want to have like a shorter one. You might want to do a rectangular circle. Same thing here. You'll have a smaller one next to a bigger one, and here as well. This way it creates a little more visual interest and looks cute. As I said, this is another example of just one item of the 90-degree flat lay. Most common. So from the side, this plate would block the food. You wouldn't have been able to see it as it's deep in the dish. Here, you can see it from the top, and adding a utensil into it adds a little more interest to it, a little more character. Some other examples of when you would do this is maybe for like vegetables, rolls, and like a full pie or cake from the top if there's a nice design. Then 45 degrees. This is another one that's common. Top down, this would not show as much of the middle, but you would still see both parts of it. And here the plates don't block the food. Then, and this can overlap with the 0 degrees. This would be for meat, sandwiches, cookies, for a lot of different ones. Some of this you kind of just have to play around with it. See, you might want to take both angles of the food, see what works best, see what doesn't, and where you can really see the most. Like here you're seeing the layers, and here are the layers, all of that. This could be good for like a slice. Then 90 versus 45. So I have two examples of the same exact spread here. This one is the 90 and this one is the 45. I don't think I'm able to see any comments, but if you guys have any ideas, then have that in your head and I will share it on the next screen. Okay. For this one, I would go with the 45 because of the different heights here. So for this, you can see it's triangles. In the previous one, you couldn't really see it from top down. This way you can see really like the shapes and capture it all. Also more of the food itself is actually visible. So the meatballs you can see from the side. This dish you can see from the side. And as the plates here are shallow mostly, they don't block the food either. You can see a lot more of it. Then my question would be, what would be best for a burger? And for a burger, I would say 0 degrees. This is the perfect example. It is straight on. Top down wouldn't show anything except for the bun. Obviously, that's not one that you would want to do with something like this that has layers. Here, the plate isn't blocking the food. You could also do 45 degrees with this one. This is kind of a more versatile one. And some other examples would be like lasagna or a cake or pie slice itself. So that way you can see the middle part and sandwiches. And then here are some examples of the lighting. So this one is done with natural light. This is just windows. And then here is an example of dim light. So obviously you're not getting the food to be as bright, but for this I would suggest maybe putting some candles and having some more interest there. And this is actually done with a handheld light, which I'll show an example of, but obviously this can become very, very bright. And you can essentially recreate a natural light with it. So some of the camera settings I would suggest, the most important ones that I would turn on is having the grid and the level on. So the grid shows an actual grid where it does 9 squares on your phone camera. And that way you can kind of keep things in the center where you want them. And generally you want things in the bottom 2 rows and in the center squares. And the level is perfect for 90 degrees. It's a little cross that comes on the camera that when you match it and it's the perfect 90 degrees, the white and the yellow cross connect so you can see that you're at the right angle. And some other tips is just focusing the camera and making sure it's level and not tilted. So you want to, even if you're doing 90 or 45 or 0, you just want to make sure that your camera is actually straight on and not tilted to the side at all. And then last is just for a holiday spread, what angle? I would say, again, this would be great for a flat light so you can really capture all of that beautiful food and then keeping lighting in mind. So if it's dim, then maybe adding some candles or getting a light like this. This is just a regular selfie light. I have it linked here, but there's a million different options. And you can use this. They change from warm light to cool light. And then a phone stand is great for if your hands are like shaky or you're tired from all that cooking. You just hook it on there and it's magnetic, and that way you can place it and kind of play around with it and you don't have to worry about shaking hands. And then you can do, as I said, just some other tools. It's like candles and then space fillers. So if you see blank space in your spread photos, then filling that up with silverware, napkins, and you can have hands maybe holding like a fork, things like that. And that's all. So thank you.
Thank you, Allie. Those were great tips. We're all going to be experts at taking photos now. That about wraps up our presenter section. And I just want to say thank you to everyone again. We have time for a few questions, and I encourage everyone to please put their questions in the chat. I did see one earlier for Shawnee. I think that Keisha asked this about the pound cake. Is it butter and flour, then in the fridge or freezer, or fridge freezer first?
So, good question, first of all. It's butter and flour. You prep it. Make sure you get out as much of the flour as you can. You only need a thin layer of butter and then a very thin layer of flour. Get out as much of that excess flour as possible and then just pop it in the freezer until you're ready to put your batter in. It can go straight from freezer to batter to oven. So it's just an amazing tip. And I wish I knew her name. I'm going to find this community member because it was an amazing tip. But good question.
Thank you so much. Let's see. Well, we've got some questions. I've got one for Susan. What's one lesser known Hanukkah dish or ingredient you wish more people knew about?
I actually would wish that people would make more either roasted vegetables or salads and not think that everything has to be fried with lots of oil on it. You know, it's just symbolic, but that's like why I love the fennel salad. And I think that's probably the thing I wish people would do the most at Hanukkah. When I go to a party, a Hanukkah party, and they're serving like latkes and brisket maybe, which I don't eat meat. So, but you know, a lot of latkes and a lot of starch and some desserts like jelly donuts. It's like, please give me some salad. So, thank
Good
you
to
for the
know.
question.
Thank you. I'll keep going, but please put your questions in the chat. Got one for Bonnie. For those who don't know much about wine, what's an easy tip for choosing bottles that will impress without breaking the bank?
Um, it is a bit of a technique, I guess. The truth is, don't be afraid of the person in the wine shop. I think a lot of times what people do is they go in the store, they don't know necessarily what they want, they're afraid to talk to the person there. Don't be afraid to talk to your wine shop representative. Be clear. And one of the things to be clear about is what is your range? Like, what are you interested in? Everybody's got a different budget. Budgets are really important these days. So don't be afraid to give them the important details. I'm doing this. I'm looking to be in this range. When I worked in a wine shop, it was a combination of people coming in, giving me a lot of specifics, and we found a delicious bottle together, and then coming in and saying, I need red wine. And I'm like, okay, well, I have 250 labels. How can I help you? You know, so don't be afraid to tell them what's happening that you know, around your event or whatever it is. Sometimes more information is better. The one thing to keep in mind, and this is not a hard and fast rule because it does depend on where you shop. If the wine is stacked 3 cases or higher in the front, it doesn't mean that it is the best wine in the store. It means that it's the wine that they're interested in selling you the most. So if it's in your price point and it looks interesting, feel free to give it a shot, but don't be afraid to go into the store. So I think, you know, one other point in terms of affordability is just don't forget about those places that are kind of up and coming, or maybe it's presenting a varietal that you wouldn't typically get there. We were talking about Chardonnay earlier. I love Chardonnay from Argentina. A lot of people talk about California. They talk about France for traditional Chardonnay. They make beautiful, affordable Chardonnay in Argentina. So I think that's the other thing. Don't forget to go down the aisle if it's listed by country and kind of search around for a familiar varietal that's in a different country that you're not familiar with. That's another way to kind of save a few dollars. So hopefully those will gear you in the right direction. You know, more expensive isn't always better as well. If they're showcasing a $30 bottle of wine and they got a 4-case stack of it in the front, maybe it's good, maybe it's not. Take a little trip around the aisles, and don't be afraid to go to some of those countries you might not typically go to.
Fun to walk through the aisles too and just explore the wines. It's almost like you're looking at books.
Yeah.
You know, each has a story.
Every time I try to ask my kids if they want to come into the store and help me pick anything, they say no, because they know that I will just keep walking around and walking around. So you can definitely get lost like a library.
Yeah, definitely. I've got one for Allie. Is there a favorite secret prop or trick you use to make holiday table photos pop? I think you kind of touched on this, but something else?
Um, let me think. Besides that, I would say this kind of goes with the tablescapes presentation, is just making sure the table itself looks interesting. So having maybe some of that holly or any other little items that would show the season and make it very holiday forward.
Thank you. Carrie, if someone's intimidated by bread baking, what's a good starter recipe or technique for the holidays?
I would say, and I'm not just talking about this pull-apart bread recipe, but there are so many good no-knead bread recipes that are out there now. The kneading, stretch and folds and all that can be intimidating for some people, but look for no-knead breads. I would say that's number one. Um, and the other one is just a bread. The recipe you will find that you will get with my pull-apart bread recipe. Um, you could make rolls with this recipe. You could take this basic bread and just make other shapes. You could put the whole thing in a loaf pan and have sliceable bread. So it's not a no need, but you can easily let your stand mixer do the work with this recipe. And that's not true of, you know, a good sourdough bread. You don't want to put in your stand mixer, but try this recipe and also research no-knead bread recipes. And I think you'll find the more you get comfortable with dough, you might want to graduate from there, but that's a great place to start.
Great, thank you. And Keisha, how do you balance a beautiful tablescape with keeping things functional for serving and eating?
That's a good question. One thing I like to do is at least, depending on how your table is kind of set up, whether you have a round table, rectangular table, I like to keep things kind of in the middle. That way it's kind of out of the way of guests. But also have it to where if you have items that you're kind of showcasing on the table that kind of go with your menu, maybe put it on the napkin, or set it at the top of the plate, depending on if you have your table already set up for dinner. So being able to have it functional so everybody can kind of move around the table. But it also doesn't have to be set up that way. I mean, especially if you're doing kind of like a buffet, you can set your items in between your buffet setup, which is really nice too. It kind of gives a little pop color. It kind of goes with your menu as well. I think that's always kind of fun too. So just some few ways to kind of set your table up, whether square, rectangle, circle, just making it functional for those around the table.
I've also heard that it's at least for weddings, and I work in weddings, but it's nice to have lower centerpieces so people don't have to talk over each other.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. I actually really love that idea. But sometimes sometimes I like to kick it up a notch, I guess, a
Yeah.
little bit. I love the idea of taller centerpieces, or the centerpieces that are kind of tall but they still have kind of like the drapes down. It makes it a little bit more dramatic, I think. But yeah, you want it to definitely be functional so you can talk to somebody across the table instead of having to kind of lean to the side to talk to someone. But yeah, I think it's any way you kind of set your table up, depending on the size and all of that, just making it functional for everybody to be able to get to where they need to. So
Yeah, great. It looks like we have one question too. Thank you so much, Keisha. We have Patty's asking for Shawnee, are your pound cake recipes adaptable for mini pound cakes?
They absolutely are. So on my site, I have an article about how to scale baking recipes up and down. And I often use that for pound cakes because I have these full-size pound cakes. I have pound cake minis, the ones that come either 4, 6, or sometimes I think even 8 little mini ones in the pan. And then I have the 6-cup pound cake pans. Like my living room over here, or my dining room over here, is lousy with pound cake pans. I love my husband because he puts up with it. But yes, you can adapt the recipes to smaller pound cakes to mini pound cakes. For a 6-cup pound cake, I just scale down by half. For minis, I actually scale down to a quarter. But once you scale down that much, it gets a little bit tricky with the leavening because you want to make sure that you do have a little bit of lift. Some pound cakes don't use any leavening whatsoever, but because I begin with the end in mind and I consider the texture and all of the things that I want from the end result of my pound cake, I do incorporate leavening, and so it gets a little tricky once you scale down by, more than half. But yes, you can absolutely scale these down to put them into smaller bundt pans. I have given away pound cakes and cookies and whatnot as little gifts, like little gift boxes to my neighbors. But it's a great idea during the holidays and it's such a holiday staple where I am, pound cake is. So, nobody ever says no to it around the holidays. They all say no to it outside of the holidays, but at the holidays, it's a great idea. So thank you for your question.
Sounds like a great party favor type of thing. That is it from me. I'm going to turn it over to Avery. Thank you so much for everything. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you to our wonderful presenters for sharing their creativity and expertise, and to all of you for joining us today for this fun and festive session. If you enjoyed today's event, please consider donating to La Dame d'Escoffier DC to help us continue our mission of mentoring, supporting scholarships, and giving back to our local food and hospitality community. And for our members, don't miss our DOMS only event on Tuesday, November 18th. It's a hands-on dumpling session and dinner hosted by Chef Tim Ma and Dom Melissa Hackbarth at Lucky Danger. Finally, all of you should keep an eye out in your inbox for a thank you email that will have the shared recipes from today, photos, and links for today's presenters. So thanks again for being with us, and happy holidays from all of us at La Dame DC. Bye, y'all.